Hello, it's me again. It's that time again. Welcome. It's nice to see so many familiar faces. And yeah, so we're going to look at attributes of God. Of course, there's not enough time in 20 minutes to half an hour to even go over one properly, but I'm going to try two. So just an overview, and more will certainly follow. But luckily, they're kind of categorized. So here we go. So the first, the first is being. That's an attribute. So when we picture God's essence, we picture it, and then those descriptions that we have, theologians sum up and organize into groups or categories. And these attributes are usually the same, but theologians may label them differently, such as moral and natural attributes, or absolute and relative attributes, etc. So we're going to use, just for simplicity, a modified version of somebody called Erickson's categories, and he categorizes 5 groups, which are attributes of being, infinity, moral purity, integrity, and love. So as I said, we're going to look at being firstly. So when we say God is spirit, at the same time, we also mean that he is not corporeal. So he's not physical substance. Jesus himself, who is the truth, said God is spirit. And he said that in John 4:24. So God is immaterial. He is also invisible. He is not a substance from which all other substance is derived, because that's attributed to another religion, actually. So he is not, creation is not an extension of God himself, because he created all physical substance and he pre-existed it. Everything that's physical was pre-existed by God. So as spirit, he is indestructible. He's also immeasurable, and he is unlimited by time or space. And that's quite a big thing to get our heads around, but it's just the way things are. Like, yeah, that's it. He's unlimited by anything, really, but specifically in the case of being, by time or space. And when the Bible references things like his eyes or hands, this is definitely figurative language which helps us comprehend his actions, and also his actions, what he's doing at that time, because we associate those functions with the physical body part that's being described. So an example of that is that by saying he has eyes, we understand that God sees. Whether or not he sees into the physical or into our hearts is irrelevant. We know that eyes denote seeing. But the Bible is not suggesting that God has eyes, as we do. God is also personal rather than impersonal. There are certain religions that hold their deity, their false deity, obviously, to be impersonal, but ours is a personal God. And when Moses asks God his name in Exodus 3, God replies, I am who I am. So he's summing up existence just by his being, just with that answer. And within that verse, he also gives his personal name, and proclaims, both his existence and his name. So even the mere act of responding to the question that Moses has put to him reveals personality. He possesses personal traits such as self-awareness, intellect, will, self-determination. He thinks, he feels, he chooses, and he enjoys relationships with other personal beings, i.e. humanity, and also the other persons of the Godhead. And his personality is also logically revealed by the existence of our personalities. The fact that we are creatures who possess personality and we are made in the image of God, as we're told in Genesis, shows us that by extension, or reverse engineering, as it were, he too has personality, because if he didn't, we couldn't. since we have one, he must also. God is also alive, and that speaks to his being, his existence. He is the very source of life. As Jesus says in John 5:26, the Father has life in himself. So unlike Jeremiah speaks, so unlike the pagan or ancient gods of stone or wood, Jeremiah says that God lives. But the Lord, he says, but Yahweh is the true God. He is the living God, the eternal King. And that's in Jeremiah 10:10 for anybody. Jeremiah, I highly recommend that book. So as the source of life, he cannot, by logical inference, extract or derive life from anywhere else. He is the sole source of life. We know that, Christ is referenced as the sustainer, and God also. Excuse me. So no other life source exists from which he can derive or draw upon. He is it. He's the buck stops there, or starts there actually. He's always been alive, as opposed to all other things which began to have life at his command, or at his behest. And he is the source of their life, but he cannot have a source of life himself. He is uncreated, as we know. The continuation of his life doesn't depend on anything outside of himself, because eternally he is the source of life, and also, which talks not to the being category, but he is self-sufficient to the extreme. He is an exemplar, the exemplar. He is the best example of self-sufficiency. He needs nothing. He is uncaused and uncreated. He doesn't actually even need to will his own existence, because simply put, he is. When he says, I am, that's the long and the short of it. That's the beginning and end of it, as it were. So he is a living, personal spirit. He is the source of life, including our life, of course, which he gave to us in order that we may relate to him again, that we may reclaim, or what's the better word? That we may come to know him as before the curse, that we may come back into union with him. And for that reason, we should thank him for life and everything in it, even the things that seem negative to us. In terms of his eternal big picture, we can't see the plans that he has for us. That's Jeremiah 29. We can't know them, but he does know them. And they are plans for our welfare, to give us a future and a hope. They're not for our harm. So moving on to the attributes of infinity. It's quite a big, that I'm not going to be able to do it complete justice, but here goes. So infinity, limitless, whatever the thing that is infinite, as it were. That's an awful description or explanation of the word, but I'm going to pad it out. So because he exceeds all limits, there is no limit to him. There is nothing that he cannot do, that he does not know, etc., etc. We say he is infinite. His infinite attributes describe his relation to space, time, knowledge, power, and change. So we're going to look at each one of those. So God's unlimited relation to space, as in space, is called omnipresence. And that means he is everywhere. There is nowhere that he is not. And just conceptually, there is no way that he is not. There he is. I am, is what he says, and he means it. 1 Kings 8:27 pictures this trait of God, and it says, "The heavens, even the highest heaven, cannot contain you." And God is not only everywhere, but he is always everywhere. He is unlimited and unlimitable in terms of spatial, in space. There's no place where he is not, and technically, I guess, as spirit, he's not spatial at all. So in relation to space, it's a kind of a, I don't know what the word is. It's not a misnomer, but it has a caveat. He isn't actually spatial in and of himself. He's far too big to be contained. We're going to get to it. So he created space, therefore he is not contained by his own creation. And his infinity is not just bigger than all outer space, as in external space, if we can even visualize that, but it's also smaller than any internal space. And that's also a dichotomy and a kind of a spectrum to try and get our heads around. There's nothing bigger than him, but there's nothing smaller than him. There's no place that he is not. There is no place he cannot be, or is not, is a better way of describing it. He's beyond all spatial measurement. There is no, limitless, and we are limited by our inability and not just our inability, but the state of affairs which precludes him from being spatially measured. So also, right, so we've done space. Now temporally, because God's relation to time is also unlimited, we call him eternal for that reason. So Psalm 102:27 says this. It says his years will never end. And that's one half of the eternal equation, as it were. He has no beginning. We know that because he's uncreated. Also, his years will never end. Psalm 90 verse 2 says he is from everlasting to everlasting. And this denotes somewhat the human, it's not quite effectual, our language, because we live inside of time and we imagine time to be going, chronologically along, either like this way or that way, like time, you grow up that way. You might, time is measured even in sign language. There are 5 different timelines that you can visually use, but I just did one, but they all denote a sequential order to things. This moment follows the preceding moment, and it will be followed by the next moment. He's not about any of that. So to say he's from everlasting to everlasting, while it's beautiful and poetic, it's an insufficient almost way of describing his eternal nature, as is so much human language in terms of describing him. Time just does not apply to him because, again, he's timeless. He was, and I suppose for the sake of this sentence, and is now before created time. And it's just difficult for temporal language even. He is simultaneously, which even then evokes the word time anyway, he's simultaneously in the past, present, and future. He exists without end, without interruption, without a beginning, without an end, without interruption. There is not, so to summarize a little, there's no where that he is not, and there's no time where he is not also. So because he's outside of time, his view, he sees all events at once, simultaneously, which is still a very poor descriptor. At once, he sees everything. He is aware of the succession of time because we are in time, and he takes such a close personal interest in our lives. So it's not that he's completely oblivious to the fact that there is for us a yesterday and a tomorrow and a today, but for him, and he may well use that language for us to evoke comprehension and understanding. But for him, those things are meaningless in that sense. They don't apply to him. So his unlimited relation now to knowledge and wisdom is what we call omniscience. And just as an aside, the Bible in certain places, wisdom and knowledge are the Holy Spirit and the Lord Jesus Christ, and that's quite interesting. But another video. So omniscience is God's unlimited relation to knowledge and wisdom. He knows everything. He knows everything. That's just unbelievable. He knows everything, and he also knows how to apply everything. Psalm 147 verses 4-5 declare this: his understanding has no limit. So it's not just knowledge, and it's not just wisdom, a kind of limited wisdom in relation to such and such a topic. His understanding has no limit, and therefore his knowledge also, just by definition of that verse, also knows no limit. You can't be endlessly wise if you don't have all of the facts. He knows all of the facts about everything, the past, the present, everything. He knows, oh gosh. So he knows every possible contingency, even though for him it's not the future. He knows from an infinite number of sources. He knows every possibility that can come around in terms of our viewpoint. And this obviously includes, because of the all that I mentioned, all the details of the universe and of us, and how we relate to the universe, how it responds to us, and how to perfectly apply his knowledge in order to accomplish his ineffable plan. And that's massively important. So his unlimited relation to power, we title omnipotence. So therefore he is capable of everything. He can do anything. And we see in Luke 1:37, the angel tells Saint Mary, nothing is impossible with God or for God. He's able to fully execute his plan. He is in control, utter and complete control. And I don't mean in a sense that makes us non-autonomous, but he is in control of you and I. He is sovereign. So, but however, his infinite power includes, what's the word? A built-in, a self-imposed limitation. And the way that he restrains himself, although that doesn't imply that it's an inability in his power, but it reveals that he acts consistently with his own nature. He won't go against his own nature. It's not, so it's very dangerous in terms of saying God can't do this, or he can't lie, or he can't such and such. If you look, it's actually, he doesn't. It's not referenced in terms of he can't, because he is omnipotent. He is all powerful, but his being, the supreme being in terms of morality, also means that he won't do these things that are less than perfect. So yeah, he restrains himself in terms of his own nature, and therefore he does not sin. You know, it doesn't even make sense to put these words in, like, it's the temptation for me is to say he can't sin, but of course he's all powerful, so he doesn't sin. It makes a mockery of it. Like it doesn't actually logically follow that it's even a potentiality of his, but for the sake of English, he doesn't sin. Because it would violate his holiness, his righteousness, and his justice, and therefore he wouldn't. Therefore, philosophically speaking, we could conceive of a greater God than he, and therefore the greater God would be the God. And do you see what I mean? Like, it becomes a conundrum almost. I have to wipe my nose, I'm sorry. So he's always consistent with his own nature. He doesn't do logically impossible things. So to make square circles, to create a rock or lift a rock that is bigger than him, or whatever nonsense comes around, he doesn't do that sort of thing. And so the four traits that I've spoken about are unchangeable. Limitless, will never be limited by external like for external reasons or by the externality, but he may choose to limit his, to remain consistent. And we call this his constancy, God's constancy. He does not, and for want of a better word, cannot, he just does not change. He doesn't develop, he doesn't diminish. Hebrews says of God, you remain the same. And his constancy overlaps his being eternal. So he cannot increase or decrease in any trait. And that is just miraculous for us. He can't love us any more than he already does. He can't love us any less than he already does. That's just massive. So he won't increase or decrease in any of his traits. They are all perfect. Because to increase or decrease would imply a previous or later imperfection. And therefore it's not God that we're describing. So it doesn't mean that he's immobile or that he's inactive, because within creation we see that he's dynamic. And since he's universally alive, there's no place or time that he cannot be. So I've already said that. He can't be taken by surprise either. He's all-knowing. He is always, and he is everywhere, and therefore accessible by us in our time of need. And he has full wisdom, enabled to fully apply his own wisdom to us and his power towards his plan. And therefore, ultimately, if we look at Romans 8:28 and Jeremiah 29:11-13, our good. So whatever the contingency, whatever the circumstance, we can perfectly trust him based on all the things that I just said, to be consistent and to do what is right, to be what is right, in fact, because he's, just the act of him saying something, as it were, or decreeing it, makes it right by default. So whatever the problems we have theologically in, making a concept fit into our minds, the limit is always on us. It is never on him. And so if you find that you're going around in circles trying to capture the essence of some theological idea, if you trust the sources that it comes from, i.e. the Bible, then pray for wisdom and you'll receive it. And I can't remember what verse that is, but it's biblical. So he knows of and he provides for solutions that fit our needs, however big, however small, because he is a personal and loving God. And therefore, ultimately, he is the only wholly, with a W, like fully trustworthy one. And that's something to certainly consider when we try to keep secrets from him, or we do things that we think would be displeasing to him. Not because he will he won't like the actions, he won't love us any less, but he is the only one to be trusted. And therefore, by extension, if the Bible tells us, so the Bible is all God breathed, but there are some passages there where either Christ or the Spirit or the Father or the triune God, whichever verse you're looking at, says something explicitly. And in all instances, but if those are the basis of some confusion for you, God is trustworthy and we are limited. That sounds like I'm ending on a poor note, but he's the only one we can trust, is the bottom line. But obviously you can trust me when I say that, because I always pray that he'll speak through me to somebody. So I got there. Infinity and being. We're going to go on to some more at a later date. Let me just check the time. I think I'm going to wrap it up. So I'm going to nip to Discord if any vacuum cleaner memorial services. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, in the live chat, somebody's vacuum cleaner has been forced to retire, actually. So, let's see what's on the... Yes, it's quite circular as well. Somebody's just commenting, we can know God's existence by our existence and by existence itself. Because we exist within existence, we know that we are the image of the unseen God, and therefore we can, we can pause it all. Yeah, it just goes around and around. I'm going to end it before I start waffling. I'm going to say, God bless you. I'm going to see you in Discord if you'd like to click the link. If the link doesn't work, get in touch with me in the comments section and I will change it pronto. Also, Rumble, if you want to subscribe. Parler, I often post stuff there. Both the links are down there. Patreon, I will be doing some stuff on Patreon only stuff soon. And I'll fill you in as and when I know. All right then, so God bless you and I will see you tomorrow. Bye.